Hello everyone, welcome to another TOPinion piece from the Top Chat podcast. My name is Matt and it's just me today. I'm going to be talking about microtransactions and why I think they're not actually as bad as you might think they are. Before I get into detail on why that is, I'm going to preface this by saying that I am in no way associated with the gaming industry. I don't know anyone that works in the gaming industry, and I am not here to convince you to go and spend $100 on V-Bucks. That is not the intention of this video at all. I'm merely trying to kind of sit on the fence and provide a devil's advocate view on why microtransactions aren't as evil as everyone likes to make out that they are. Here's why. So, gaming has progressed in recent years where players are now less invested in their games as perhaps they once were. What I mean by this is that before you would maybe read a preview in a magazine on a game and then go to the store and pay £40 or $50 or whatever for a game that maybe you'd read some news on, ultimately you just kind of maybe like the look of it or the box art, whatever, and then you play the game. If you like it, great, but if you don't like it, the chances are you play the game anyway because you've already paid for it. These days we have opinions absolutely everywhere you look. There's gameplay previews, press events, early access weekends, conventions, YouTube videos, all sorts that show off games pre-release. Mainly thanks to the internet, of course. Game companies such as EA and more recently Bethesda with Fallout 76 have made gamers lose trust in pre-orders because of events like these, which does affect sales, because if you made a bad game before, then ultimately your pre-order sales would mean that next time around you can reinvest that money and hopefully make a better game. These days, if you don't like the look of something that you have on pre-order, you cancel that pre-order, suddenly the developers are not getting that money anymore, which isn't a bad thing. Hopefully you get the point I'm trying to make. Also, we now have free-to-play dominating markets, and here's where microtransactions start to come in. Now this began with Minecraft, it's been expanded by games like Warframe, Fortnite, now we've got Apex Legends, games that people do not pay for. This is a risk on behalf of the developers and the publisher, but you can see from these games that I've mentioned alone that if they are good enough games, they capture people's attention, the money will follow because of the microtransactions. Free-to-play games rely on microtransactions because, well, for one, they're free, and two, is because video games are one of the last remaining forms of media that have not become absolutely covered with advertising. Let's say you're halfway through a game of Call of Duty and an advert for Burger King pops up, or you see a billboard while you're driving around in GTA advertising a new Honda. It's really going to break the fourth wall and suck you out of that game world, which is something as gamers, none of us want that to happen. Microtransactions became a dirty word because of companies lying to their player base and their consumers by locking content behind paywalls, but not all of it's been that bad. So, for example, do you want a skin? You have to pay for it. Do you want a chance at getting a certain weapon? In Counter-Strike, I'm looking at you there. You have to pay for it. But the thing is, most of the time, this stuff isn't pay to win. It's mainly all cosmetic. And here's another thing. Back in the day, you bought a game and what was on the disc was what you got. That was it. There was no updates, no DLC, no extras, nothing. But these days, thanks to the internet, companies can expand their games and add longevity, which isn't a bad thing, but certain companies have handled it badly, leading microtransactions to be called, immoral and awful, blah blah blah, whatever you want to say. What it comes down to is that no one is forcing you to pay for these extras. There are rare occasions where companies lock content behind paywalls, which I agree is scummy, but you don't have to pay if you don't want to. I'm going to use Destiny as an example here because it's a game that I know very well, or knew very well. I don't really play Destiny 2 at all anymore. However, Destiny launched, and then a few months after its release it had The Dark Below and House of Wolves as two kind of reasonably large DLC drops that you had to pay extra for. Now, I bought these because I was enjoying Destiny, but then when I installed the update, what I didn't know going into it was that the content I'd just paid for was already on my disc. I just had to pay extra to unlock it. That's where it kind of gets to be a bit immoral for me, is because I've bought the game, this content was already on the game, but you're charging me extra to unlock it? Yeah, that doesn't sit right with me. But then it boils down to a catch-22 of, am I enjoying this game? If the answer is no, then stop playing it. Don't pay for any microtransactions, go and get yourself a new game. But if the answer is yes, then is it that unreasonable for a developer to ask you to pay more money for more content? To me, no it isn't. As long as it's a reasonable amount of money for a reasonable amount of content, then ultimately what's the harm? It's your decision, and it depends on how invested you are in the game. Going back to the Destiny comparison, a year after launch, there was a big content drop that was essentially the size of the vanilla game all over again, and it didn't cost as much as the vanilla game, which to me is completely reasonable. And because my answer to am I enjoying this game was yes, then I of course paid for that content drop and I kept playing Destiny because I wanted to keep playing Destiny. I also think that microtransactions has become a buzzword for negativity in mainstream media because, let's face it, as we know, mainstream media for the most part doesn't like video games. And where the horror stories come out here that, really don't help microtransactions cause is where kids have access to their parents' funds. Maybe they once topped up their child's Fortnite account so that they could go and buy a new skin because, their friends have it or whatever. I'm not giving reasons why, it's totally up to you if you want your child to buy a skin or whatever. But then the funds are still accessible to the children who then, quote unquote, accidentally spend hundreds of their parents' money on these microtransactions. Now, this is kind of a fault on the parents' end, however the companies can definitely do more to stop this from happening. Let's say they do a security question for every time there's a transaction about to go through on the e-store of their game, a question that the parent knows the answer to that they then of course don't tell their child, so before the kid adds £90 worth of V-Bucks to their account, a question pops up, the kid doesn't know the answer, bang, they can't put the money in. Job done. Just to recap, I think microtransactions aren't as bad as everyone thinks they are, because if you're enjoying a game and you want to play more of it, is there really that big of an issue in having to pay for it? I mean, that's kind of how consumerism and capitalism works. No one gets anything for free these days. I basically wanted to ask the question of what does everyone actually think about this? Because I have a theory that it's just a media storm and a lot of smoke without any fire, really. So let me know in the comments what you think about microtransactions. Do you love them? Do you hate them? And get in touch with us on Twitter. We are at TopChatPodcast. See if we can get a discussion going. Thanks very much for listening. As always, bye for now.